Thank you. All right, I'm Austin. I'm a full stack engineer, DevOps engineer, and the founder of a company called Serverless Inc. I'm also super jet lagged, so apologize in advance. Serverless computing is this new popular trend. It's essentially kind of the next generation of PaaS, except it has a few different qualities. It's about microservices instead of a complete application, and these microservices are zero administration. They're basically managed by the cloud provider, and the developer doesn't have to do anything to operate it. They just upload the code. And this is where the name serverless comes from. It's about describing that experience, where even though servers exist somewhere, they're managed by the cloud provider, and the developer doesn't have to think about them. And this all started, this renaissance in serverless that we're seeing right now, all started because of a new cloud computing product put out by Amazon Web Services called AWS Lambda. And this was launched in 2014. And now there's a movement around serverless. It's very popular right now around serverless computing and the serverless architecture in general. And we have a company called Serverless Inc. We build tools and infrastructure for building entire applications on this new type of cloud computing. And we built this application framework sort of before there was a movement, before anyone was really talking about serverless. And the point of it is to help you build apps exclusively on AWS Lambda, to do bigger projects on this. And this framework was a big inspiration of the serverless movement. And it helped show people what's possible with this new type of cloud computing. And it's been a super successful open source project. I started it by myself in July of 2015. In that time, we've gained about 14,000 stars on GitHub. We have a fantastic community. The technology is incredible. Community is even better. But I'm not going to talk about those things in this conference. I'm actually going to try and tell the story of this project, of making this project purely from the perspective of packaging. That's what the conference is about. But it's also something that I think about all the time, actually, and I personally obsess over. And the reason I care so much for packaging is because I'm from Hollywood. And and I guess I don't have to say anything else. But I studied filmmaking, design, and programming in Hollywood a lot when I was younger. I used to have a digital agency over there in my teens. I did all types of projects, and it was my education into the world of packaging. And Hollywood is this bizarre and fascinating culture and industry that exports lies. Fiction, basically, in movies, music, television. Hollywood knows really well that humans are emotional creatures. And it's filled with these artists who know how to manipulate those emotions and design things for emotional impact. Like a director, for example. Most people who watch movies, they have no idea what a director does. They have no idea how a director orchestrates a shot or a sequence of shots to help generate some type of emotional effect in the audience. They just kind of sit there and watch the TV and they absorb it. Kind of like how a programmer will design a little bit of code to perform some logic. The exact same thing, and of course I bring this all up because Hollywood knows packaging. It's a culture of packaging. The culture of packaging is overflowing over there. It goes out of the industry to, I used to know paparazzi guys who you could hire at the coffee shop and they'll follow you around at the nightclub to give you the right impression. I was at a bar one time and I was talking to this girl and she said, "Oh, I just finished singing on Britney Spears' album." And I said, "Oh, that's cool. You like a backup vocalist?" She said, "No. I sang as Britney on the album." So Britney was unavailable to make it to the album, so, so I sang it for her. I even helped my friends write a lot of scripts for reality television. So this culture of just kind of manufactured reality and packaging is thorough in Hollywood. But Hollywood doesn't really call it packaging. Actually, Hollywood calls it story. And I argue that packaging is just story. And I'm a big story fanatic. I studied it for a long time. It's one of the oldest means of communication, spans cultures and history. It's a vehicle for a message, for information, and for your product. And I moved out of Hollywood several years ago to the Bay Area, and story is what stuck with me above all things. And I don't see story mentioned often in engineering culture. I hear kind of vague discussions about design and stuff, but they don't really go into the science of that too much. And now when I build software, because I haven't forgotten the power of story, my goal, of course, is to build great technology. But with that, I think you need to tell a good story, otherwise it won't work. And when AWS Lambda came out, this new cool serverless compute technology, I recognized its value immediately. I was like, oh, microservices, event-driven computing, pay per execution, zero administration, this is valuable stuff. But at the time, AWS was telling the story really poorly. Like there wasn't much you could do with it. It was really new, kind of complicated in how they were pitching it and diagramming it, and it wasn't super accessible. So telling the story of this new cloud computing service became my obsession and my focus. And that's what I focus on. It was just the story. Now every story has a medium, of course, film, song, or a canvas. And I needed a medium to tell this story. And I chose a framework. It's because to me, the bridge between the developer and a new technology is most often crossed via a framework. Frameworks are abundant, almost to the point where they're cliche, though things that are cliche are often true. But frameworks are still great at providing context for the new technology, how you use this thing inside of a bigger application. Frameworks offer an outcome. It's not just kind of just some high-level discussion. It's use this to do this. Quick setup and use with frameworks, and best practices all in there so you could do all that stuff, move quickly, and do so safely. The framework is the medium I chose for this story. And a framework, I argue, is still one of the greatest mediums for telling the story of any new technology. Up next was the message, of course. Great stories always have themes, right? Like popular ones are the hero within, it's like The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars. Individual versus society, that's Schindler's List, Fight Club, or vengeance in like The Revenant. And even music sometimes, like The Wall, Pink Floyd's album, is all sort of conceptually about this metaphoric wall. I think great stories are pure expressions of a theme, and I think that way about products as well. And if you want to tell the story of your product or technology super well, you've got to find these themes and stick to them. This is a good quote I like by Sidney Lumet, who's a fantastic director. But basically what he's saying here is that the theme is at your core, and everything that you build must be a pure expression of that theme, otherwise it does not belong in the story. And I always think thematically. Now, I'm always looking for themes in society and product and story all over the place. And some great themes about serverless computing have emerged, which have really kind of helped popularize the movement. There's the long-lasting one of developer productivity, build more, manage less. There was some good writing saying no one cares about machines or containers, they only care about logic and results. Someone else said this is the democratization of compute. Really awesome, high-level themes. But I was looking for something when I was designing this product that were themes that were more low-level, because I wanted to give to help people, to help communicate this new technology to people and help them sort of conceptualize it. Because the problem with this new technology was this is what Amazon puts out. It's just these hairy diagrams. And what you're looking at here with the serverless architecture, you have all these little zero administration microservices. They're all rigged up to events. And it's a massively distributed architecture. And of course, AWS puts out these massive diagrams to explain it. But they're super ugly. The docs were very confusing. Lots of concepts. A lot of concepts is always a sign of too much complexity. But after thinking a lot about all this stuff and a lot of trial and error, I found the themes I was looking for. AWS Lambda is merely a story of functions and events. And that's all it is, really. And with those two concepts, you can build massive systems. So events and functions is what I organized the framework around. And it took a little while to figure this out. But this is essentially our main config file. And all you do here is this is a YAML file, you list out your functions, and each function has an event property. And in there, you just set all the events that trigger that function. And that's it. With that, you can build anything with this new technology. There's an HTTP event, which will create, the framework will look at that, and it'll go create an API gateway endpoint that points to this Lambda function. All types of stuff, from IoT apps to chatbots. All this can be expressed with these two simple concepts. And this story here, these themes here have been incredible in communicating what is a complex architecture, but also helping drive the implementation to keep things simple. In fact, AWS loved this so much, they just took it and put it in CloudFormation, their own syntax. So it's kind of a testament to how well it's working. Anyway, themes not only help you communicate what's going on, but can help guide the implementation. Themes give you conceptual integrity. And Fred Brooks, the author of The Mythical Man Month, he writes a lot about conceptual integrity, which I love, because basically he says he describes it as it's better to reflect one set of design ideas than to have many good but independent, uncoordinated ideas. And to me, that's just find your themes and stick to them, no matter what. Themes give you this conceptual integrity. Furthermore, people are always talking about developer experience and simplicity, and I hear people on my team, they come up to me and they say, yeah, we're going to make this thing and it's going to be super simple, and I say, how's it going to be simple? And they're like, I don't know, it's just going to not have a lot of stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, how else? Well, it's going to have really thin fonts and we'll only use lowercase. And I think a lot of people talk about simplicity, but they don't really understand where it comes from. And I think simplicity comes from sticking to your themes or conceptual integrity. I think simplicity, straightforwardness, developer experience proceeds from conceptual integrity. And this is where you get all those great qualities. And so again, it's like the most important thing you should think about for your implementation and how you communicate the story of your product. So I got over the medium, the message, and now for the style. So this project didn't actually start as called the Serverless Framework. It reached large traction via an entirely different brand. This brand was Gras. It came out with this in, it was July 2015. And this style was born out of kind of two feelings I was having. Number one, I felt very strongly that this technology was disruptive and it was a big deal. This wasn't just like a 1x gain, this was a 3x gain. And I wanted to create this brand that helped communicate that in the messaging. And also I was kind of personally rebelling against minimalism at the time. Minimalism is kind of what everyone defaults to these days. It's kind of getting boring to me almost. Sometimes it's right and it's perfect for the project. Sometimes I'm convinced that the originator just lacks a voice, so they don't know what to do with the project. But anyway, this was pretty successful. The shark excited everyone, and the story was big, it was interesting, it was grabbing people's attention. It was also a really good story post-Docker. We had a lot of people from the container community coming to this project because they didn't really want to think about containers. Containers are amazing technology, by the way, but these people didn't want to think about containers anymore. And the shark was a cool mascot after the whale. Actually, I had a few marketing ideas of the Docker whale kind of floating upside down in the ocean with this big shark bite and an X over the eyes. But then a couple things happened. Number one, we were funded as a company by the investors in Docker. So that had to change. And then there was some copyright issues with this brand, which as soon as it grew very popular, we ran into. Anyway, so we had to change. And in late 2015, we switched to the Serverless Framework. And we did this because it was the easiest way to tell the story. It's the Serverless Framework. And soon after the brand change, we switched to that implementation of functions and events. And so the story was the Serverless Framework. Make zero administration applications expressed as functions and events. And it was around this time, this is 2016, when I say that we saw our biggest uptick in satisfied users. And I can't say it was because the technology had improved or whether it was the product story. I guess at the end of the day, I don't see a big difference between those two things. I think, again, they're one and the same. So takeaways, packaging is story. Story drives implementation, communication, and adoption. And then lastly, of course, great stories require many drafts. So all this stuff I'm talking about, it took months and months, over a year of iterations. I was reading this book one time, like maybe 10 years ago, by Woody Allen. He was describing how he makes films. And he says, sometimes he'll take 50% of the budget and he'll go write the screenplay, he'll shoot the movie, and then only in the editing room does he actually figure out what the heck the movie was about. And then he takes the other half of the budget and then he goes and he reshoots a whole bunch of stuff to try and hone in on that story that he finds in the editing room. So just an example of how long it could take, how many drafts it takes to get to something good. But that's it. Go out there and make great stories.